class.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm so glad you've joined us today. Today is going to be a really fun class where we are going to be embellishing photos embroidery. So we're going to be adding embroidery floss to some different photos and use some different stitches to really kind of take some of our pictures and enhance them with a little bit here and there of just a couple of little hints of threads and colors that are really going to make some of these pictures pop. This is something that I just recently started doing. I print out my pictures onto cardstock, probably about a 65-pound white cardstock works best. So those of you who are with me today, I did go ahead and include this picture is a picture I took, I think, in 2016, and it's of the London Eye. If you've ever been to London and if you've ever rode on their major carousel where you can really overlook the whole entire city. So this is a picture that I took in 2016, and I'm actually gifting this to all of you. So there's a PDF of this picture if you actually want to print out this picture on cardstock and do this exact same kind of embroidery as what I did here. What I love about this particular picture is that it has so much geometry in it. So there are perfect places for all the different lines to kind of pop out, and there's perfect places for all of your stitches. So look through some of your photos and think about what might have some really cool geometric features to it. You can also think about some landscape kind of photos. If you have some beautiful photos from Puerto Rico or from Colorado with that really blue sky and those really green leaves and trees and mountains and things like that, these are all things that would be great pictures for you to add some color to. And then, of course, family photos just really are touching to me. So I have some family photos to share with you today that I'm going to do a little bit of embellishing on also. So let's go ahead and switch over to the other camera and I'll show you what's going on. This again is that London Eye photo, and I'm just going to kind of change the angle a little bit so you can actually see those stitches. And on the back, you can see all of the thread that went into this. And you'll notice my method and something I put onto the shopping list today is really tape. So you don't have to have this exact tape dispenser, but I love this one because it clips on to the side of my table. And so then it's a really hands-free kind of, especially if I'm trying to stitch something, grab a piece of tape, put it down to hold my spot. So I'm not going to be tying a lot of knots with my embroidery. I'm definitely going to be utilizing tape to keep all of that on the back. It helps keep it a little bit flatter too, so if I do eventually want to put this into a frame, I can. So this is the London Eye photo, and this is available to all of you. If you're watching this video or you decide to watch this video later on YouTube, this link will be below the video too. So if you don't have time to print something out right now, or if you don't have cardstock or color ink or something, go ahead and take this file and take it somewhere. I still go to different FedExes or Kinkos. There's still a couple of Kinkos around me that exist that I can get this professionally printed out onto cardstock, or you can do it at home, of course. So I have the luxury of having some really amazing photos of my actual grandma on my mom's side. And so my grandma was born in 1910. And so these photos of her are her being a teenager in the 20s. So we have her cute little one-piece bathing suit, and we have her with kind of her flapper hairstyle and her flapper era kind of wave and the little hats. I love all the hats that she wore back in the day. So my grandma's name was Margaret. And this particular picture is from 1928, her sitting on this cute little stump. So taking this and then transforming it into this. So I took that picture, I printed it onto cardstock. If you have actual pictures, I scan them using a scanner. And then I go ahead and put the scans into files that I can print onto cardstock. And then with this one, I just added some 2 different colors of pink kind of in the background just to kind of draw more attention and be a little bit more festive. And then I had another photo of my grandma. I think this is at Coney Island in Cincinnati and in Ohio. And so you can see the little amusement park in the background. And then she's again wearing her adorable bathing costume. I also learned that during the 20s, people didn't have elastic as much as we do. So that's why the bathing costumes look so dramatically different than the swimsuits that we wear these days. So just so crazy to think that this wasn't that long ago, and yet it feels so long ago. And then with that same photo, I took some embroidery floss, and I added something called a French knot to the tree to kind of add and pop out some leaves. And then just a couple stitches at the bottom to kind of show off her little shoes. You could also do her belt or different things like that. So yeah, I think that this is a great, great picture. Exactly. Someone was with me for one of my other classes and knows that I do have a picture of my grandma from her teenage years, and she is definitely kissing someone, and that person she is kissing is not my grandpa. So that is a photo that I have, and I think, oh, here it is. I love this picture. It's just her in her prime, you know, in her teenage years having so much fun. So I love this. Added some fireworks for her. You're welcome. So anyway, we are going to be working on some of these pictures today. If you do not have pictures that are printed out already and you are not ready to play with pictures, another idea is earlier, I think maybe just 2 weeks ago, we had a really fun class where we made affirmation cards. So if any of you happen to join my affirmation class card where we used our jelly plate and were able to create all these different sayings and things like this video is available on YouTube. It also utilizes cardstock. So I had mentioned during that class too that you can easily take any of these and add another kind of mixed media element by adding some embroidery floss onto those. So if you don't have a picture printed out, but you have something on cardstock, something like one of these affirmations or maybe any other kind of saying that you've created, we can add some stitches to those as well. So keep that in mind. And also coming up in the near future, if you like what we're doing, I'm having a Pi Day class because some of you who've come to these classes before know that I used to be a high school and middle school math teacher, and I am a giant nerd. So I love celebrating Pi Day, which is March 14th, 3.14. And so I'm going to be using some math and using a compass and protractor and things like that in order to show you how to create some of these designs that will also be stitching in a very similar way to the way that we're stitching the pictures today. So if you enjoyed today, I hope you come back for Pi Day. I won't turn you off by the math. I'll just sneak it in there so that you don't notice. And I'm going to go ahead and begin on a photo that I've been wanting to try out. So I'm going to go ahead and start on the photo of the London Eye, since that's the one that I'm giving you all access to. And I'm going to show you kind of my methods of how I went about doing this, so that if you want to kind of emulate this and repeat this, you can. And then I'm going to take some of the other photos I've been kind of teasing you with and showing you and kind of work through some of those and show you some different stitches to work on. So one of the most important elements of our embroidery today is having a needle that definitely has a point on it. So sewing through paper is a lot harder than sewing through fabric because you're going to meet quite a bit of resistance. So you definitely need a needle that has a point on it. Now, if you weren't able to get embroidery needles specifically, we have a really nice set of needles, assorted needles at Michael's too. So this is another option if you don't have the embroidery needles that I was showing you in the materials list for today. But these have tons of different options for very wide eyes, which are great for embroidery and floss to go through, but also still different levels of point. So you do want something very pointy because you are going to be making pokes through the paper. And with this London Eye, I kind of took the time to look through and see the pattern of what's going on here. And you might be able to notice it too, that each one of these is basically a square. And so I'm going to punch the 4 holes that make up the square. And then I'm going to be able to take my embroidery floss and cross around each one of those squares. So let me give you an example of me poking through. And I need to prepare these holes so that I have a space for my embroidery floss to go through. So this is one example of the hole right here at that square. And at each one of these squares, I'm going to poke 4 different holes. So when I flip it over, you're going to start to see the pattern of the holes on the other side. I know it's hard to see right now, but you'll see once I get going. So I'm going to poke, basically they're parallel to each other, and we're creating these squares. And I'm going to be following along the curved lines but then also crossing over each one of those squares to create that kind of diagonal as well. So I'm going through and punching holes at each one of those spots. And here's what it's starting to look like on the other side. Hard to see since it's kind of like a white, but you can see all of those. Yeah, so another good example, someone's putting into the chat talking about this architecture makes for great embroidery. So also think about something similar like the wheels on a bike, or if you have like a picture that has a Ferris wheel or some cars, you're still going to have some of the same geometric structures that would be fun to pull out with your embroidery floss. I'm also going to think about what color. On my original picture that I did, I used a red, but there's also some great neon kind of undertone of a pink in this photo. And so I think this time that I'm going through, I'm going to be trying a different approach with a pink. So it's going to be a little different than the original one I showed you. And the perspective changes down towards the bottom. So it's less of a square, but you still see me poking through these white spots and then poking across from it so that I have enough places to do a diagonal. And I'm going all the way through and poking as many of these as I can. I think I still need 2 more up at the top. And then I'm ready to show you how to get started and how to kind of secure your thread and go from there. So with my needle, there are 2 different kinds of loops and thread embroidery floss. There is a kind that we call craft cord, and the craft cord is kind of like twisted or braided, and you cannot pull it apart into separate little strands. It all is one strand. And then we have our normal traditional embroidery floss, and the embroidery floss itself can be pulled apart. So I'm going to be able to twist this to show you that it's made up of 6 separate strands. And so if your needle is too small, you can just pull 2 or 3 of the strands instead of using all 6 at the same time. And that can help you fit them better through the needle. So if you have this embroidery floss, I'm going to use all 6 strands. But if your 6 strands are not fitting through your particular needle, you're welcome to kind of gently pull those strands apart and use a few less so that you can fit it through. And if you happen to be using the cording, know that you can't separate those and just make sure that the cording fits through your needle and you're safe to use either one of those. So I mentioned before that I kind of want to play with a little bit more of the pink rather than the red this time, just to see something a little bit different. So this floss I just pulled out is 832, and it's a loops and thread color 832. And I think it's going to be a fun kind of corally pink that's going to be a little bit different than a traditional red. A good red color is something like 730 for loops and threads. But rather than use the red, I'm going to try using the coral this time. When you're pulling out some embroidery floss to get yourself started, you don't want to pull out too much because it's easily going to start getting knotted up. And especially since we have our tape dispenser on the ready, we can easily start and stop, no big deal. So when I'm pulling out my thread to get started, I'm not going to pull too much. It's probably just going to be about, I would say 20 inches or so to get myself started. And I'm going to grab my needle and go ahead and thread my needle. So if you have troubles threading your needle, there are lots of different techniques to try and help you. And there are also some tools, some metal kind of pieces that you stick through the eye, and then you can more easily pull your thread through. No need for a knot in this type of embroidery. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do all of the different diagonals first. So I'm going to pull my thread. So I'm on the back side coming through one of these holes. I'm pulling my thread, and off to the side of where my holes are, I'm going to be putting a little piece of tape that's kind of hanging on to that tail. And notice how I'm putting the tail kind of away from where the other holes are, because you don't want your holes to get clogged up by the tail and by a lot of extra tape. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing these diagonals. So I'm going to go across with this one. So yeah, there's another suggestion in the chat, and I think I might take this suggestion too, Jennifer. This is a good suggestion. I'm going to follow all the diagonals going from the bottom left to the top right with this color. Then I'm actually going to try and switch colors and see if I can get like a lighter color to kind of show the contrast in those two lines that I'm doing. So I think that's going to be fun. Or you could get a variegated strand like this one, which is 806 for loops and thread, which kind of changes for you from reds to pinks. And that could be a fun way to change color without doing too much work also. So these are great suggestions in the chat if you have any other ideas or if you're kind of playing along. I'd love to know what kind of pictures you'd like to try this on. I obviously don't suggest trying them on the actual picture. I recommend scanning and making copies onto cardstock rather than utilizing your actual picture, because you just never know what might happen. But you can already kind of see those stitches adding some extra dimension onto the London eye. I'm also curious if any of you have ever been to the London Eye. And I would guess, but I don't know, that probably none of you had the same experience I did at London taking high school students. So we traveled with some high school students to London and went on a week-long sightseeing journey in London with high school students. So that was something that I was lucky enough to be able to go. So I was happy to have a really cool trip, even though that's a lot of responsibility, taking kids across the pond, keeping everybody safe. I'm kind of pulling this towards me so that I can see some of the holes, just because I'm holding this a little bit further away from myself while I'm doing it on the camera. So yeah, this technique could look really good on flowers. I agree. And even I think there's a great opportunity. Some of you were with me on our embroidery class the other day where we did a whole embroidery sample of lots of different styles of stitches. And one of the stitches we talked about was the lazy daisy. So you can imagine using the entire daisy to make like a flower. We stopped at these two, but making all the petals. And you can pop that flower into some of your different pictures on top of real flowers, or just as kind of like little punchy elements that are kind of just fun. But having all of these holes pre-poked is definitely what you want to do in order to keep yourself on track. And I do recommend doing, if you're going to switch colors, pay attention to which colors on the top and which colors on the bottom. So I'm putting this line going in this particular diagonal direction, all that same color. And then when I do the next line, it's going to be a different color and they're going to be going in a different direction. Because sometimes it does matter when you start stacking floss on top of each other. Sometimes it looks better to have a plan and to have it very, especially something like this that's geometric, to have it going the same direction. So yes, London is a beautiful place to visit. But these kind of Ferris wheel carousel kind of things are popping up lots of places. I know somebody told us that they're from Atlanta. I'm pretty sure, Atlanta, that you have one of these kind of sightseeing carousels in downtown Atlanta, I think. Are there other cities that have these? I don't know of any in Canada. We have a couple of Canadian viewers too. Big Ben, that would be a good picture. Or like a bridge. Oh yes, like the in Cincinnati we have a suspension bridge that is by the same architect as the bridge in New York City. And I'm just about running out of my embroidery floss. And so I've done all of these stitches down to about here. And I'm going to go ahead before I run out and tape this down on the back and pull out just a little bit more. And then I am going to switch colors and do the second diagonal. So we think that there's a wheel in St. Louis. I didn't know that. I've been to St. Louis once. Of course, I've seen the arch because that's what you got to do when you go. Got to see all the fountains. There's the Missouri side. And you got to see both sides, see all the different things. Here we go. And so when I'm pulling this back through, I'm going to tape this down. And I'm just making sure that they're off to the side and they're not anywhere near where my real stitches are. So this is looking good so far, and it's pretty nice and flat. So again, it's easy to frame if I want to do some framing later. Yeah, the arch would be a great picture. I bet you have a really good picture of the arch that you could use, and kind of, I would go along the sides of the arch with some stitches, and I can show you how to do what we call a running stitch that makes like a long straight line. Getting pretty close. And the reason why I use cardstock is because when I'm doing these stitches, you don't want the stitches to be bending the paper. So if you just used regular printer paper, it would be a lot easier to stick a needle through printer paper. But when you're stitching, it's not going to keep the photo nice and flat the way this cardstock does. So I do recommend like a 65-pound cardstock. It's probably just the right weight to be able to have enough stability, but still be able to poke through. If you have a thicker cardstock, or even I thought about doing this on postcards, but honestly, I think I would need a thimble to push holes through a postcard, just because postcards tend to be so much thicker. It could be cool, and it's a great way to have a picture already printed out, but I think it would be harder to do stitches onto because of its thickness. And I'm just about there. Yeah, we got some good bridges in South Carolina that you could take pictures of. I'm sure there are photos that already exist that would be gorgeous to do some embroidery on top of. A little bit of tape, and then I'm going to switch colors, and I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to go in the other direction. So you can help me with my color choice. This is what I have so far. I can add in a little bit of this orange. I can go even lighter, maybe a little something in between. I have like an off kind of tan. Let's see. I think this is the one I started with. I think I'm going to go for this next layer of orange, or I think I'm going to go for this golden. Do you want to see this orange, or you want to see this golden? What do you guys think? The peachy gold? Okay. All right. See, that's why you're here. Thank you. Thank you for your assistance. So this number is, I think, 762 in our loops and threads. I'm going to grab this and start back up again with tape. And I think we're going to enjoy how we see these two colors kind of interchange with each other when I do the diagonals going the opposite way. And you can do as much stitching or as little stitching as you want to on these pictures. I could stop right here and call it done. And it does add an extra element to the photo. It is fun, but we have time and we are going to keep going. So when I'm doing it this time, I'm going to be taking the diagonal going in the opposite direction. So I'm going to start at this top corner. And I'm going to be doing the diagonal coming across this way. So I do need to stop myself before I pull it all the way through and tape down my ends. There we go. And now I'm going to go back through and do a bunch of these diagonals kind of as quickly as I can. And I already like that contrast. That's looking really sharp really quickly. It's really just showing off that architecture, which I think is cool. Yeah, so there's another thing in the chat that says printing onto canvas works beautifully. So yeah, you could use, you can get that printed on. I've also done before where I have printed onto the material that goes through an inkjet printer and then you iron it on. So after you print something, you can iron it on. That tends to be a little thicker and harder to go through, but it's also something that I've used before to make some really personal family ornaments. So I took some of the pictures of some of my relatives and turned them into ornaments that I stuffed because I was able to print them onto some fabric and then sew two of those pieces of fabric together to kind of make a little stuffed ornament. So I like that too. So there's a question that asks, do you pre-make the holes or do you just do it with the needles? And I definitely pre-make the holes. I don't recommend doing it as you go, but doing it ahead of time obviously takes a little bit more planning. And when we switch over to something like a photo of a person, a couple of other things I've fallen into or that I've tried is at first when I had this photo, I wanted to do her swimming suit. And so I thought about a satin stitch. And for those of you who don't know, a satin stitch is something that fills in completely. So I thought about doing a satin stitch to really just pop out her outfit. But the problem with paper and a satin stitch is that if you have a whole bunch of holes right next to each other, you're just going to eventually rip through the paper completely. So you're not going to be able to do satin stitches. A running stitch is always going to work, and you can do some, this is a little bit more like a running stitch on these because there's spaces in between them. You can also do a back stitch to do some outline of the dress, but you won't be able to fill it in. So the other way that I do some of the fill in might be by tying some of these knots and kind of making a little bit more filled in by doing some knots instead of stitches. So that's something to keep in mind too. So I love the way that this is looking. I think you guys made a great choice with this peachy kind of gold yellow. It's kind of really hitting some of the lighting that's happening in this picture too. And I will show you how to do some of those knots that I've been showing you on the other photos as well, and kind of take you through how I think through where to add detail and where not to add detail. Because it is paper, you don't want to have too many holes too close together because you will just end up destroying it. And also I've chosen a needle that has a point because I need the point to be able to go through the paper, but also the needle has to be wide enough to fit embroidery floss through, but also not too terribly wide so that I don't make holes bigger than they need to be. Because again, I don't want to kind of destroy the integrity of the picture. But this photo, I just want to say again, is available to all of you. So you can use this exact same photo that I'm using. I'm gifting it to you, and then you can have your own kind of creation with it, or use it as kind of a starting point to practice on, and then find some photos from one of your favorites. I just made a mistake. I came up in the wrong place, so I'm going to undo that and come up in the correct place. There we go. And of course, you could take more lines. So there are more lines on this photo. Some of these Ferris wheel lines, wires that actually go out towards each of these. I could pop those out with some different gold floss and things like that too. but I'm really going to focus on these spokes because I think they're the most interesting part to me. And I'm flipping this around so that I can kind of get a better view of this as I am sewing. And you'll find what's most comfortable for you while you're doing it as well. So if anyone decides to try this, remember that we have an Instagram called Learn with Michaels. And we love sharing everybody's pictures. We had a couple people share after the last embroidery class some of the work that they tried with their sampler. It's really fun to be able to kind of see some of the things that you all are creating. So if you feel comfortable sharing, go ahead and tag us at Learn with Michaels. You can also check out my own personal Instagram at the number 4M Coleman. And on my Instagram, you can see a couple more of my examples of some of these photos that I've been working on. And some of the other classes I've been doing. So tomorrow I am teaching a class on how to make granny squares. So I feel like this is just like a granny focused week for me, with using the pictures of my grandma and then also teaching everybody how to make granny squares tomorrow. So this is a fun week for me. I'm in my element. I hope that if you have any interest in learning to crochet granny squares, that you join me tomorrow, or you can always catch the video later if you're busy. But we will be doing a little bit of beginner crochet and trying to get through granny squares together. And I'm just about at a good stopping point on this one. Maybe a few more stitches, and then we're good to go. And now I'm playing chicken with the amount of floss I have left, trying to get those last few stitches in without having to re-thread my needle. And I think I'm going to do it. Aha! I did it. I'm going to tape that end down. And here's what I have so far. Look at how different that is. So just to kind of show you the difference, here's the original one that I did using that red thread. And I did go back and I also did another line through all of these, going basically horizontally and vertically across along with the diagonals. And this one gives this exact same picture a very different feel by only doing those two diagonals and doing one of those in the lighter color rather than having those both in the same color. So I really like this for you to be able to see. I'm going to stop here on this photo, but I could go back and I could also do a third color and kind of follow the outside of each of these. I could potentially go back and also do some of those lines in between too, but I really like to be able to show you how different this is and how it really does pull out different colors of the exact same picture by using different embroidery floss. So I would love to see if you have a different version of this picture, if you choose to use the London Eye photo as well, and kind of give yourself something a little bit different. So I'm going to put these to the side, but that was really fun. This is what the back looks like, just some of my tape and some of my stitches, and it's ready to be put somewhere else. And I'm going to switch over to some photos. And this is one that I've had my eye on. Can we talk about how adorable this is? So this is my sister and I sitting in our little garden back in the 80s. So this is definitely an 80s photo. I'm wearing a Cincinnati Bengals t-shirt and she's wearing some cute little farmer overalls. So I can take some techniques with this one. What I was thinking about is doing some of the stitches on her overalls. I think that would be fun to pop out and maybe do the stripes on my shirt. I about doing those flowers in the background. But I think I'm going to focus on some of the accessories, and maybe let me know in the chat if you're an 80s kid or a 90s kid and you had these little baubles that your mom put into your hair when you were younger. You know what I'm talking about, those big plastic balls. Those are so fun. So I'm going to do a French knot in each one of those too, just to kind of pop those out. So let's have fun with this photo. Because she's wearing some denim, I think I'm going to kind of lean into either white to do the stitches of the line, or a blue. Haven't decided yet. I'll think about that. And then I do think I'm going to pop out the white stitch on this Bengal shirt. So I'm going to use a little bit of white for that. Yes, Felicia still uses them. Good. Somebody should be. All right. I'm going to start with the white, and I'm going to do the stripes on the Bengal shirt here. But I want you to think about if on these overall stitches, should I use like a tan or should I use like a blue? Let's see if I got another blue that I might like. I have lots of fun colors over here. Here's another blue or a darker blue. So I want you guys to think about what I'm going to do with the overalls. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and do the stripes. So you do need to pre-punch your holes. So if I'm going to do these stripes, I'm going to punch a hole here and here, and that's going to be one giant stitch. And I'm going to do one here and here. So these are far enough away that I think you're not going to rip the paper. You can kind of see those holes, but you are going to get the effect of that stripe. So we'll see how that one goes. And then if it goes well, we'll do the stripes on the other side as well. So this is some loops and threads, 772 white, just a pure white. I love this photo. I think it's so cute. Yep. Pigtails for days. All right. Taking it down. That already. And obviously I'm not going to try to fill in the stripe, but I like just having those two kind of big stitches really kind of give that illusion of the stripe and having it pop off. I'm going to ignore this stripe for right now. I might come back and do it later, but I really like the way that one looks so far. But I'm going to poke holes over here, and I'm going to do one on each side of this top stripe. And I'm going to do one hole on each part of this bottom stripe. And I'm going to be lazy, and I'm going to let my thread go all the way across back here. I'm not going to cut it and retape it. This cardstock is thick enough that I'm not worried about that stitch pulling my picture in any particular direction. So I'm just going to pop this white color here. Love that. That's cute. I like that. There we go. And she is ready. Go Bengals. Cute. Love it. I'm going to tape this down, and I'm going to keep this white. And I'm going to go to those hair bobbles I was talking about. And I'm going to show you a French knot. So I'm going to go to here and go to here. I'm going to start out with, I poked a hole in each one of those spots where her hair bobbles are. And I will tape this down and show you this stitch called a French knot. And the French knot is great for that dimension. And on the grandma photo I keep showing you, it was used for some of these leaves. So it's a good space filler, or it's good for something round, something like a dot, some kind of extra dimension. It's good for all of those things. So here we go. I have my photo here. And in order to make a French knot, you're going to take your needle as close to the photo as you can. And you're going to wrap the thread 1, 2, 3 times. And with it wrapped 3 times, I'm going to go back through that exact same hole that I came up through. And I'm going to pull through those 3 loops. And by pulling through those 3 loops, I've made kind of a round giant knot. So it looks and kind of emulates that hair bobble. Since that turned out so well, I'm going to put another one right next to it to kind of make it look like it's the matching set of bubble. So I want to poke, I don't want to poke too close. So I'm poking a little bit down further. And I'm going to do another French knot, which means I'm going to wrap 1, 2, 3 times and go back through that same spot in order to create a knot. Oh my God, I love that. It's so stinking cute. It's ridiculous. And I think for good measure, I'm going to connect these together with one final stitch. We'll see if that looks weird or if that looks okay. Oh my gosh, I like that. So it pulled the little bobbles a little closer together, like how they actually are. I really like that. I don't think I have enough thread to do the other one, so I am going to need to rethread at this point and get a little bit more white. But I do want somebody to tell me if they want me to use blue or if they want me to use like a cream on these stitches on the overalls. So I want you to give me your best idea about those, please, while I'm rethreading and getting that last bobble with the 2 French knots. So I'm rethreading. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and poke both of the knots, both of the holes for the 2 bobbles over here, a pale blue. Thank you. Okay. I'm taping this down and I'm doing 2 more French knots. So with the French knot, you wrap. I'm keeping my needle horizontal to my photo and it's on the table right now. And I'm wrapping 1, 2, 3. And then I'm pulling back the tip of my needle to be able to go through that same spot I came up through. And I'm pulling a knot. I'm going to do the one right next to it. And I have 1, 2, 3. Go through. And then I'm going to try and attach these bobbles together with a stitch. And it just kind of pulls the 2 knots a little bit closer together. I really like the way that looks. I really like that. All right. So another option for these is once I've done some stitches and I really like it, I can also mount this onto a blank card and then I can send it to her in the mail. Like, look at how cute we are. Ooh, I think I have another blue option that might work. I just noticed some more. Somebody suggested a pale blue. So I think I'm either going to use this one or this one. I think I'm going to use the palest. Well, that looks too much like the white. I think I'm going to use this blue just for fun. So this blue number, if you're wondering, is 870 for loops and threads. I'm going to pull out a little bit of the floss and I'm going to get going on a couple of stitches. I'm going to use a back stitch. And a back stitch is very similar to the running stitch, except it fills in all the dotted lines. So it's a very solid line stitch. And in order to create it, I'm going to start on the bib and I am going to poke, I would say a little less than 1 centimeter, so that when I get to the curve part, so you see those holes that I'm poking. So when it gets to the curve, there's enough of a curve to make it make sense. So I would say those are about 1 centimeter apart, maybe a little bit less than that. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to stitch these with something called the back stitch. So I'm taping this down. And with my back stitch, I'm going to go to the next hole and pull it all the way down through. And then for the next part, I'm going to come up at this next hole. So it's going to leave a little bit of a blank. And if I were to do a running stitch, at this point, I'd keep going forward and I'd leave a dashed line. But because I'm doing the back stitch, I'm going to go backwards and fill in that blank that I just created. So I filled in that blank. I'm going to stitch through the hole that's ahead of where I'm working. And then I'm going to go backwards and fill that in. And come up through here. And go backwards. And I already kind of like the way that this bib is popping out with that light blue that we chose. And maybe you want to pop out, I'm thinking about the little brass parts of her overalls might also be cute to pop out. But I like the idea of enhancing the stitches on the jeans with stitches. I think that's clever. So that's what I'm kind of going with right now. And I'm going to poke myself a couple more holes going across to kind of finish off this bib going across the top. And besides doing these kind of like pulling out different shapes like the stripes and like this bib, I could also just do outlines. And so I could take a color and just outline the orange shirt in orange and things like that. That's another option. So you could put something in her pocket. That would be adorable too. Maybe a little frog. Oops, I'm going through the wrong stitch. There we go. So cute. I love that. So cute. That's what we have so far with our baubles, our little bib, and the stripes from the shirt. I want to show you some of the other pictures that I was working on. So this one was my grandma in the 20s. This is about 19, pretty close to 29, maybe 28, 29. So she's a teenager. Great Depression has not yet hit. She has this cool photo booth kind of thing. So with this one, I'm kind of pulling out her teenage kind of style by adding almost like little graffiti pieces. So I made a star, I made a daisy, I made some dashes. So let me show you how to do a couple of those. I think I have another one of her strips. Yeah. So this is the same one. So to kind of show you how I did a couple of those different stitches, for something like the star, I used 5 points for my star. So I poked through and made those 5 different spots. And then it's the lines themselves that end up making the star. So I'm going to make 2, 3, 4, 5 holes in that picture right there. And then I'm going to come back through with like a yellow, and I'm going to go ahead and make that star for you. So there's another question that asks, is there another way to finish the back of the piece? I'm worried about the tape not being archival. Absolutely. So you can tie knots. So anytime I'm doing tape, you could potentially tie knots. The reason why I'm using tape instead of knots is because I'm trying to keep things flat. But if all of yours has knots, it's all going to have kind of the same thickness along the back, and I don't think that's going to be a bad thing. And I do think it will stay a lot better than potentially tape in the future. So I think that's a good solution for you. So to show you that, I'm going to go ahead and make a knot here. So I'm going to tie a knot at the end of my embroidery floss before I pull it through. And the way I'm going to make this star is the same way you would draw a star on a piece of paper, is I'm going to go up through the top stitch. And then I'm going to go from the bottom towards that same top point. And then I'm going to go across. Go across here. And then there are just a few more diagonals to finish filling in. Here's one. Here's another one. Great question, or another good comment. It says when you're finished sewing, you can remove the tape and use archival glue. And that could help you out too, Joanne, if you're trying to keep something that's a little bit more substantial than the tape. So if I'm doing just knots, I'm going to go back through, I'm stitching through some of my other stitches and pulling that over my needle when I pull this through to create a knot back here. So I'm using some of the stitches to kind of stabilize this knot that I'm tying off, just to make sure everything is secure. And then without using any tape, I can cut that off. And we have our first little star. I think I have time for maybe one more, so I'm going to try and show you the heart. And the heart was kind of made using part of a lazy daisy stitch. So I'm going to find a cute little pink. And I think I used just three holes for this one, but I'm not entirely sure. So let me check. Threading this needle with pink. There we go. Almost got it. Yay. Okay, I'm going to poke 3 holes for the heart. And I'm going to start at the bottom hole. I'll go ahead and use a knot again to show you. Okay. So when you're doing a lazy daisy, you're making a loop. And I came up through this bottom hole. I'm going to go back down through this bottom hole, but I'm holding on with my thumb to make sure that the entire stitch doesn't go through. I'm going to catch it with my thumb, and I'm going to come up at this top point. Oops. Right here. I'm going to catch it before the loop goes all the way through. And by catching that stitch, I leave kind of like a little loop. I'm not going to pull it too tight so that I can leave some of that loop. And I am going to stitch it, like kind of tack it down by going back through that exact same top stitch up here. So I basically have a stitch right here that tacks that loop down. I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to create a second loop coming from the bottom. So before I go back down through, I'm going to grab it with my thumb, keep it from going all the way back down through. And I'm going to use that top hole that I punched in order to stop this loop from going all the way through. There we go. And I'm going to try and keep it round like the other one. So I'm not pulling it all the way tight and flattening it out. I'm kind of leaving some of the curve. And then I can stitch behind it to kind of secure that down. And then we have what already looks kind of like a heart. And you can fill that in, you can make it more pointy, you can make it, you can add in a couple more holes. I think I did add in 2 more holes to kind of fill that heart in if you want to try it like that. And then a lot of these other ones, this is a complete lazy daisy. So I did, I think, 5 petals of what I just did. So instead of stopping at 2, I made that center and I kept going 5 petals through that. And this one too, I went ahead and just kind of made, like, instead of the star, I put a hole in the center and all of them radiated out of that, just as kind of like another little fun flourish to add. So we are out of time today, but we have done a lot in this hour and I have had so much fun playing around with these photos with you. I would love to see what kind of things that you have been working on. So if you have anything to share at Learn with Michaels, make sure that you tag us. And if you choose to use the London Eye photo, I want to see your color choices. I want to see which stitches you decided to enhance. And I hope to see you again. Maybe tomorrow we can crochet some granny squares together. But in the meantime, thanks for joining me. I had a lot of fun and I'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.